I've been involved with movement in some capacity for over 20 years. I studied yoga for many years before I launched into tango. And the number one thing that everybody struggles with the most, whether it's in dance or it's in yoga, seems to be balance. It's very interesting to me that balance is such a mystery to us. And the other week, I asked my community in my private group whether they've struggled with balance and how they managed to work with it, what they've learned along the way. And once again, I was struck by how much people think about it, how much people don't know about it, and how much confusion there is. So I decided I would do an episode on balance, and I really hope this is helpful for you in a practical way, but also I hope it kind of gets you thinking about your own perspective on balance in your body when it comes to tango, when it comes to your daily life. And if you want to share some of your insights, I would love to hear them. Include them in comments under the podcast episode. I would love to get some of your thoughts that way, or you can contact me on social media at I am so tango, IMSO tango. Welcome everybody. This is the Tango Banter. I'm Yelizaveta. If this is your first time, very happy to have you with me. And do check out the links in the show notes. There's a link to my private community on Facebook if you'd like to join. I do these kinds of banters live every week. So if you want to participate and join in a live setting, you can do that in my Facebook group. So there are a lot of perspectives on balance. There's a lot of ways people learn to think about balance, and quite a few of them are incorrect. And to me, as a teacher, when it comes to teaching balance, I find that my job is to guide people to remember what they already know physically, because balance is something our body knows how to do. We know how to do it when we're kids. Like I remember being a kid and being able to balance really easily and climbing trees and being very physical and not ever wondering about balance. But I also realized when we're kids, we're much more willing to fall. And as we grow older and our bodies get more mature, bigger, more fragile, just because of the size, we get really scared about balance. And it's a very common experience for people to go through their life and not ever think about balance. And then they start something like yoga or tango or, I don't know, ballet or any other movement-oriented activity. And suddenly they realize that balance is not that straightforward, that there's something's off. And most of the time when I ask people about their balance and what they're struggling with and what they've tried, a lot of times people say, oh, it's my core. My core is not strong enough, or I need to strengthen my ankles or my feet. And it'll be just these ideas of like strengthening something, that we're losing balance because we need strength in a certain part of the body, like something is collapsed. And there are cases when that is what's going on. But most of the time in tango, it does not have to do with strength. It has to do with alignment. And alignment, what I mean when I say the word alignment, is a particular relationship between parts of your body that facilitates a particular type of action, right? So if I pitch my head forward a little too far, my head is going to overpower the alignment and pull my axis forward, and I'll be much more likely to fall. And so in that case, when my head is too forward, there's a misalignment in the structure. So if you think of it as an engineer, that's kind of how I think about the body. I try to imagine all these, let's say, disparate parts that are connected, and somehow they have to balance each other out in different moments with different activities that we do. So misalignment in the body is actually quite common, but for the most part, we can compensate in our daily life. So if somebody has a habit of just being a little hunched over, it's a very common posture for our Western civilization. Just, we all know, sitting at a desk in front of a computer typically does a number on our posture, and we, shorten in the front, and we have a little bit of that hunchback even, some people who really sit a lot begin to really dip in their spine. And it might not really be that big of a deal when you're walking around and you're doing things that you're used to doing. But then suddenly when you get into an embrace, you'll realize that having your head too forward will cause you to start losing balance. And then that's when most of the people get really frustrated and they sort of can't figure it out. Like, why am I losing balance? I don't lose balance here, but I lose balance here. And it's like, it doesn't compute. So a lot of times when we think about balancing, even the idea of physical balance, not falling over, let's say, we imagine that, okay, I have this goal of having this alignment. Let's say I tell you that you need to have your head above your shoulders. You shouldn't have it pitched forward. And I give you certain markers of good alignment when you're standing, right? And then you think to yourself, okay, all I got to do is just keep this alignment. But when it comes to tango, you're not standing, you're moving. So every time that you land somewhere, it's somewhere new, and your body has to find its way into balance in that position for that moment until it has to move on and do it again. So balance, rather than thinking of it as something that's very static, where what we're trying to do is muscularly arrange our bones in such a way that we are aligned properly the whole time, right? That's how I used to think of it when I first was studying yoga. I was really obsessed with figuring out what is the ultimate optimal alignment. But really, that's not what's going on in real time. That's very artificial. It's a very conceptual space, because balance is something that happens over time. It's dynamic. It's something that evolves and fluctuates. And to me, when I was studying Buenos Aires with Mariana Dragone in one class, she said, tango is like controlled falling. And when she said that, I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Because it's not like with every step, we're attempting to line ourselves up perfectly to achieve this sort of perfection of form. And that is a mindset that I used to also have as a dancer. But it's kind of based on a more static understanding of balance. What she was talking about, this idea of tango as a controlled fall, is that with every step, you're approximating. You're just sort of reaching for a place where your body can approximate the best place to land, to be balanced, to be steady, so that it can spring to the next place. In that way, to me, it's like a very athletic type of thinking, like an athlete. If you're an athlete and you're looking for ways to optimize your body so that it's more dynamic and more agile. And that way of thinking really changed the way I started working with balance in my own body, how I started working with people on balance. And in this episode, I just want to give you an overview of some of the ways that you can start thinking and visualizing balance and how to apply that in your dance right away. Some of the things that have been really helpful to me. And I'll be mentioning some of the things that the dancers in my community also contributed, which are, there's a lot of wisdom in that group. So do check it out. If you're not a part of it yet, do check it out. It's a really great community of dancers. So one thing I think it's really important for us to accept as a premise is that balance is something that's intrinsically a property of our body, that our body wants to be balanced. It's designed to be balanced on two legs, on one leg. We have that ability. And when we accept that and start looking inside of ourselves to study our balance and how our balance works, we come up to a lot of resistance. Okay. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to take on a responsibility and say, okay, I'm gonna figure out my balance issues here, instead of going to a class or a teacher and having them tell you, right? So ultimately, learning balance in your body is something that you're going to be doing 24/7. It's something that you have to do in a way, because that's a requirement for daily life. So when we're thinking about balance for tango, a lot of times the point at which we're having trouble is where we're actually working with someone else. And before you get to work with someone else, the issues that are expressed in that moment when there's trouble, that's already in your body. So at some point we have to sort of take on the responsibility of studying what is our body doing to balance. And here's where I want to give you a really useful image that will clarify to you what it is you need to be looking for. There's a difference for me between balance and stability. Just think of those two words and think about how they feel to even articulate in your mind. Balance is not necessarily stable. Whereas if you have something that's stable, it must be balanced. So I'll give you an example. If you see a piece of furniture that's missing a leg, let's say you look at a chair and there's 3 legs and one is missing, and you look at it and in your brain, you'll be able to say to yourself, I can't sit in that chair. That chair is going to fall. Like, it's very clear to you. You see it in your mind and you understand ahead of time that this structure, a chair, is balanced. It's not falling over, but it's not stable. And with our bodies, it's very similar. A lot of times we think about balance as if it's just a matter of not falling over, right? We're thinking, oh, I just need to stay upright at all costs. But really what we're after as dancers in tango in particular, because we are dancing with another person, we're looking for stability. We're looking for a way to land on every step in such a way that we're able to go in any direction equally, with equal amount of power. That's kind of the goal here. So the body needs to arrange itself on every step in that way. That's what we're shooting for. We're always approximating. It's never perfect. Well, maybe 1 out of 1,000 times it's perfect and it feels great, but that's not the point. The point is to have this intention that I'm going to move my body with so much integrity, according to my own mechanics, according to my own dimensions, so that on every step, I am able to go in any direction, and my partner will do the same. And when the 2 people are doing that at the same time, that's really, to me, is the sort of the holy grail of tango in certain ways, mechanically speaking. Now, how do you get that? How do you develop that ability? One thing that I've learned from dancers that I've been talking to about this, and just my own experience, is that it's very hard to develop this with a partner in the context of tango. You got to go somewhere else. You got to do some solo movement stuff. And a lot of people have been talking about doing yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, Qigong, those kinds of traditions that require you to really study your own body and space and how it moves. And I've drawn a lot of inspiration from these traditions for my own practice to work on balance, and something that you can do very easily. Doesn't require any sort of instruction really, but just to take like a couple of steps, tango steps. Let's just say you go forward and side, okay? And now slow it down and do it in slow motion to where you really are moving as if through molasses, and focus on really being on one foot for a long time and transitioning very slowly. And just that idea, which is that, that image of Tai Chi where you're like moving very fluidly, very slowly with a lot of control, and you're able to balance on one foot very easily. You can do that with any tango step, forward, side, back. You can take a molinete step and break it down and move very, very slowly on your own. And just that exercise is going to begin that journey for you to figure out like, oh, this is where I'm losing balance. Whenever I'm taking my foot off the floor, I'm already falling over, or this is where I feel the tension. So these are the tips that I always give to students who tell me that they're struggling with balance. And a lot of times they'll come to me saying that it's my core. I need a stronger core. I need a stronger feet. I need stronger ankles. And of course, it's great to work on strength, and strength training is great to implement as part of your daily life for sure. But for the purpose of balance, it's really much more about this feeling that on every step, your intention is to land without losing any of your physical power, right? I think about stability as a power, right? Imagine yourself being so powerful that you cannot be pushed over, which is a great little exercise I sometimes do with dancers. It's just to be moving and then pause in the middle of a movement together with your partner. And then somebody comes around and just pushes you to see if you can actually resist, right? To be stable. How do you know if you're stable, right? Like some of you probably are asking that. Well, ask yourself, can you be pushed over? That's a great test. A lot of times, like even for movements, like more complicated movements like volcata or colgata, where it's required that you use the opposition of the other person's weight. Those are great feedback exercises that give you a sense of how balanced are you, how stable are you, and stability is really about that alignment. Now, I know a podcast episode is not the greatest format to talk about these concepts because it's much better to see them. So I recommend you check out my YouTube channel as well as my Instagram, because I post a lot of content about this, and I break it down a little bit more thoroughly, and I actually show it in my body. But I know a lot of you guys are just listening; you're not watching a video, so I'm having to describe these things as best as I can. So, in addition to working on your own balance, right, to implement some sort of daily, weekly practice of just exploring your own mechanics. You can do it as an exercise before you go out dancing. Like just for 10 minutes, you just stand on one foot and close your eyes and see how long you can stay up, and just tuning into that ability. There's lots of different ways you can work on it. It just requires you to actually say to yourself, you're going to do it on your own. So in addition to that, once you get that going, you want to also consider that when we're talking about balance and stability in the context of tango, you have this other person that's connected to you, and you're not really in control with who that person is, what level they're at. Do they know what they're doing? Do they understand these concepts? Do they understand the difference between balance and stability? So there are things that you can do to help yourself sort of compromise in a good way, not necessarily to give up your own stability and your own alignment. But there are things that you can do to make it easier on yourself that will help you stay balanced. And I know that it's a little different for leaders and followers. So here I'll sort of talk specifically to each role. If you're a leader and you're having to dance with somebody who's really challenging your balance, one of the things that I have to remind myself is to really use both feet. Use both of your feet, use your whole body to offset the weight. And especially if you're dancing with somebody in close embrace and you start getting pulled off axis because they're pulling you too much, I suggest opening up the embrace a little bit and allowing yourself to back up so that you create a little bit more space between you and your partner. So your partner has a little bit more space for their movement and you can ground more into your feet and offset their weight. Now for followers, I gotta say, unfortunately, it's a little bit more complicated because you've got a few things going against you right away. You're having to walk backwards, which is a skill in itself. You have to be wearing heels a lot of time. You don't have to, but a lot of people wear heels. And heels, of course, make balance more complicated. And then if you're in close embrace, you're kind of at the mercy of the leader. So sometimes if you're dancing with somebody who just kind of pulls you off axis, and let's say I'll pick out the most dramatic scenario. Let's say it's somebody dancing with you in a really close embrace where they're holding you really tight. And so you really cannot have use of your own body. You're sort of at their own mercy. In that case, a lot of times the instinct is to get really anxious and get kind of stiff because you're trying to sort of protect yourself. And what I tend to advise is that instead do the opposite. Imagine that you're just going to melt down and make yourself more grounded, not necessarily hanging on your leader. So I'm not talking about just relaxing your embrace so that you're just hanging on the partner, but more like softening your knees and softening your ankles and breathing into your back. A lot of times, the leader's arm kind of cinches in your back and you sort of push, your chest is pushed forward. That's a huge thing that throws followers off their axis, by the way. And a lot of times what I do is I sort of forced myself to breathe into the back of my ribs, which will kind of inflate the back and bring my ribs back in my body a little bit. And that helps to alleviate that feeling off axis. Now, granted, actually, for close embrace, I don't mind so much being off axis, especially if it's like very traditional milonguero style and they have good technique, because it's a very small range of motion and I'm not really pivoting a lot. But when it's in open embrace or like salon style, and let's say the partner, your leader, has a very stiff embrace with a lot of tension, I then highly recommend that you learn to modulate your tone of your embrace. And there are times where you have to relax the embrace so that the intensity of power that's coming from their side is sort of dissolved. And so this kind of brings me into that aspect of tango that's a little bit more advanced to a certain degree. Like there's a lot of dancers who don't necessarily know that the embrace is not something that stays static, that it's something that evolves, but it evolves differently for leaders and followers. And for followers especially, to be able to modulate your embrace means that you can protect your axis. That's kind of how I think of it. So if I'm dancing with somebody who's got a lot of energy, a lot of force around them, I tend to want to soften myself around that impulse so that the center of me, my axis, stays more quiet. So now we can kind of bring all of these things together. So on the one hand, balance is something that's dynamic overall, and it's something that you can implement into your life the work on balance, and it does pay off very quickly. Like if you want to do an experiment and just take a simple exercise like standing on one foot with your eyes closed for 30 seconds or however long you can hold it for a week. Or let's say before every time you go dancing for the next month, every time you go dancing, you do something in slow motion. Or if you practice yoga, there's lots of poses on one leg. And do that before you go out dancing. Then when you go dancing and now you're in partnership, really have this mindset in your imagination as you dance, that your goal is not to be perfect on every step. Your goal is to be the most stable, right? And you engage your body for that purpose. You modulate your embrace if you need to, and kind of give yourself permission to adapt as you need. And I know that for some of you, that idea might sound like, whoa, what does that even mean? Because maybe you haven't spent that much time inquiring inside your own body and looking at it that way. But that's kind of where it starts. So whenever you dance as a follower, or really as a leader, on every step, ask yourself, would I be able to remain stable right now if somebody pushed me, right? Like just an instant of that question. It's like, I'm stepping in such a way that I need to be able to resist a force coming at me on this next step. And if you think of it that way, just observe what happens. And I guarantee you, you will see some changes. It's that fast. It's that immediate. Balance, again, some people they're so afraid of even looking at it because they think that their balance is so bad, they're the worst, and it's going to take them forever to get better at it, right? Like, it just seems a very common fear. But really, the premise is that balance is something innate in our bodies. We know how to do it. We definitely knew how to do it when we were kids. If you watch kids and how they move, it's amazing. They're fearless because there's this connection to that animal part of us that was there from the beginning. And it's still there now, no matter how old you are, how long you've been doing tango. And so however little work or focus you put towards it, it will pay off very quickly. And I've noticed with myself that even thinking about your balance differently affects balance right away. So I'm excited to hear from you and what you will experience. Now, I know there's a lot of dancers out there who already have a lot of wisdom about this. And if you have certain exercises or insights or concepts or resources that have helped you to get your balance, to make your balance better, do share them with others. If you want to share them with me, I'd love to have those available and to share with other dancers. But then for some of you, I know you might have just started tango, or maybe this is like such a big ask to sort of go into your own body and study these things that you've never done, or they're kind of unfamiliar. If you do feel that way and it's kind of overwhelming, one thing I don't want you to think is that it means that you shouldn't do it and you don't have what it takes. But I would suggest that you think about getting some privates with someone who can help you understand these things. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a tango instructor. It might be someone from a different modality. But I would seek somebody else's expertise, because what I've noticed for many of us, we're very tactile, right? We're all different learners, but For me, I'm an extremely visual learner. I can learn something by looking at it. I've always been that way. And for me, I don't need a lot of explanation about something. I just can look at it. But for other people, you might be very tactile. You actually need to feel that before you understand how to do something. And that's where working with somebody one-on-one who really understands anatomy and physiology and movement, so seeking out someone who really can guide you and whom you understand, right? I've talked about this before, like when you're looking for somebody to work with, you got to find somebody that you can trust and that you can understand. Because I got to tell you, there's been so many teachers I studied with where I'm like, I don't understand what you're talking about. And I thought it was on me that I'm somehow lacking in my intelligence, but no, it was just a mismatch. So you got to find somebody who you really jive with and have a few sessions with them, not like a huge amount. You don't need, months and months of work, but somebody to kind of get you started and give you something right now that you can grab onto. So yeah, I would recommend that you check that out. If you're in LA, this is kind of like what I work on the most. This is what is really fun for me, to help people find that ability within themselves. And it definitely is something that improves your dance tremendously. I cannot even begin to count the ways that this benefits you, because not only does it improve your dance, but a lot of times it will take away a lot of the pain that you might be experiencing. I've had people come and tell me that their feet hurt, and then I look at their posture and I'm like, yeah, well, your head is too forward, right? Imagine if you're all the way forward for hours and hours dancing, the pull that is created down the spine, down the line of your body, all the way to the feet, that can create a lot of discomfort and lead to plantar fasciitis and other things. So we tend to think of the body as sort of separate. It's like, oh, my feet hurt, I need to focus on my feet getting stronger. That's kind of a lot of times where our mind goes. But the body is so much more integrated than we think, and it's much more intelligent in that what you feel in one part of the body, actually the culprit a lot of times is somewhere else. And that's something that I have to learn myself. So when you're losing balance and you feel it in your lower back, you might think, oh, I need a stronger core, but it might be because your knees are locked, and that's the thing that in a private session, like when I'm working with people, that's what we look at, right? When people come and we make videos, and I can look and I can pinpoint, because I'm such a visual learner, that's how I think of it. It's like I can pinpoint exactly where the misalignment is. So getting that initial instruction of alignment in your body is probably one of the most important things you can do for yourself as a dancer. It automatically will improve your dance quite a bit. So I threw a lot of stuff at you in this episode. I hope that it's helpful. Maybe you're having some new questions. Maybe some things were confusing. Please reach out. Let me know. I want to be helpful in as many ways as I can be. So please don't hesitate to share with me. Check out my other social media channels where I'm always posting content on these topics. And I look forward to chatting with you next week. Until then, ciao.